And in fact, some people will tell you if you don't win more often, you're not going to make money, which of course is not true at all.
Two traders, Darren and Walter, pull back the curtain on profitable trading systems, consistent money management, and profitable psychological triggers. Welcome to the Two Traders podcast.
In this episode of the Two Traders podcast, Darren posts his last 100 trades on social media and gets really weird feedback. I talk about why your account size may dictate how often you trade. You'll see why focusing on your reward to risk ratio may lead to trading burnout. We also jump into the interesting thing about sex and being wrong. I talk about the Japanese cheesecake, and you'll see how anchoring may lead to losing trading habits. You'll see why there's a danger focusing solely on profits. Darren talks about the elevator experiment that he saw on TV, and Darren also gets into how he controls destructive trading urges. I talk about what you might be able to learn from a very weird dentist in Queensland, Australia. And Darren talks about why he thinks you might want to trade what you know. Darren has a theory about unforced trading errors that he jumps into in this episode. And finally, you'll learn how the turtles were taught to avoid trading mistakes. All this and more in this episode of the Two Traders podcast.
Welcome, Darren, to the Two Traders podcast. How are you going today?
I'm going pretty good. Had another good week trading. It's going really well at the moment, actually.
Excellent. So, last time we spoke, I remember you said you wanted to talk about something. So what exactly is on your mind?
I wanted to talk about this idea of priming. Have you heard of priming?
Yes. When I think of it, I think of the psychological aspect. Is that what you're into, or what do you mean?
Yeah, there was a documentary I saw. I want to talk about priming, and I want to also talk about traders' expectations and results as well. I'm not sure which way to go first, really. Let's just talk about the results first, because this is something that happened this week when I was trading. And traders have got this kind of idea about what are acceptable results and what are unacceptable. And sometimes you might, as an example, I quite often on my Facebook page, I post my sort of most recent results of my own trading. And I posted it this week, and I do it in blocks of 100 trades. And at the moment for me, that's about 4 weeks trading, just under 4 weeks trading. And I posted this 100 results, and my win rate was 49%, and my average winner was 2.6, and my average loser was 1.5. And to me, if I can do that consistently, that's amazing. It's beyond what I really be happy with. But it's amazing that the amount of traders that sort of replied to that and, essentially were saying, well, how can we improve those results? And it's just like, in any other sort of form of trying to make money, whatever it be, even if you're like betting on the horses, if someone could consistently give you close to 2-to-1 on on half of all your bets, if you sat down and worked it out, you'd bite his hand off and say, yeah, sure, it's a no-brainer. But it's just weird how we've kind of got into this. There's like a sort of certain amount of win rate and a certain amount of risk to reward that if you're not sort of achieving that, then somehow you've got to like make improvements. Even if you've got expectancy to make consistent profits, people have got this desire to improve them. Have you come across that?
Well, when I think of this, I think of the people, like when you post videos on Facebook or whatever, blogs and things, people tend to talk about how you don't know what you're talking about, or I mean, the trolls come out on YouTube and Facebook and things like that. I don't really pay attention to them because I don't know if that's what you're referring to, because you're actually couching it in sort of a nice way, saying, well, how can we improve this? Almost like these are your friends who are kind of trying to help you out. My experience has been that most of those people are happy to talk about improvements, but some of the most scathing remarks are just the trolls. And typically, if somebody's going around on Facebook looking for traders or YouTube looking at trading videos, they're probably not settled on a trading system, and they're probably not making money consistently. That's just been my experience. So I'm not really concerned about someone who's not making money and what their thoughts are, really. I do think that you bring up a good point in that it's likely that people are focusing on your win rate and not really looking at the whole thing in context, which, as you suggested, is really the expectancy of the system. The expectancy of the system with those numbers is obviously really good. And although the win rate is less than 50% or hovering around 50%, that's what a lot of people are going to focus on. I've noticed that most people would rather win. And in fact, some people will tell you if you don't win more often, you're not going to make money, which of course is not true at all. We're actually, this week, we're going to have a trader come in the forum who wins like 1 out of 4 times or 1 out of 3 times. And he makes a whole boatload of money, you know? So these things are not true, but it's what we focus on. So I don't know exactly what the flavor of the comments are that you're getting, if they're more kind of, you don't know what you're talking about, or are they really kind of constructive and saying, hey, Darren, well, what if you did this or what if you did that?
Yeah, well, I just think it strikes me that there's a lot of traders that are perhaps missing the point and perhaps not focusing on an end goal, and more, you know, maybe they're kind of, say, they're drawn to wanting to win rather than saying, you know, what am I in this trading for? For me, I want a regular income that I can be consistent with, and that's it for me. And if I do the math, and then the whole thing together makes sense, and whether I win 30% of my trades or 70 doesn't make any difference. And the other one that I notice that people rarely take any notice of is the frequency of trades. If you only make a small net profit on your trades, but you're getting 30 trades a week, then that could be sufficient. If you're only getting 2 setups a month, then obviously it's a different scenario. And frequency of trades is sort of rarely taken, you know, into account. And people are really interested in data, but if your data's not complete, then you might as well, you know, not bother.
Well, I've noticed, like in my interactions with traders, that the frequency of trades is something that they do. Maybe that's just because it's a reaction to the fact that I don't typically have 15 trades going a week. And so what I get a lot of is, hey, Walter, this looks good on the daily. Why don't I trade this on the 1 minute chart or something like that? You know, because they want to get more trades. And usually that's usually a product of having a small account, and they just want to build it up quickly, so they see that. So from what I've seen, frequency of trades is a focus, win rate is a focus, but expectancy is not a focus, risk of ruin is not a focus. And so they're really they want to trade a lot, they want to have a high win rate, they want to make a lot of money, and they want to do it really quickly. If you have a larger account, you don't have to trade that often, because 1% of a big account is a lot more money than, risking 1% of a small account. So it all kind of works together. But I think you're right. I think typically what happens is people focus on the wrong things. And that's why I don't have a real problem. There's 2 ways to approach this. I don't have a problem with those traders out there who write books and say you gotta focus on reward to risk ratio and don't worry about the win rate. Really, you need to focus on reward to risk ratio. Make sure it's 3-to-1, blah, blah, blah. I don't really have a problem with that. I do think it's been beaten into the ground, and that most traders, if they do read trading books and these sorts of educational materials, they're going to get this message. But here's the problem with that. A lot of traders, they can't win that marathon. They can't finish that marathon. In other words, they get beat down psychologically when they lose 7 out of 10 times. And so they start to drift and look for something better. And that's why I'm actually, I think, a little bit different than some of the other traders out there who say, you got to get 3-to-1, you got to get 3-to-1. I say, look, if you really understand your risk to ruin, and you're okay with having a lower reward to risk ratio, then you can go with a high win rate. But you got to be really careful, because it's easier to make mistakes and slip into that negative expectancy if you start taking profits too early, right? So there is a danger there. It's just a different danger. The danger with a high reward to risk ratio is you burn out and you look for something better because you're sick of losing. And then the risk with the high win rate is that you start to take profits too early and you reduce your reward to risk ratio too much. The other thing that's interesting about what you say is this idea that we want to be right. I found that female traders as a whole are so much better at being wrong, which is a funny thing to say, but it's true. I mean, women, if you look at the data in psychology, we know that women get, men will talk over women in just everyday conversation, and women are really kind of good at pointing out subtle. They're very subtle at the way that they point out that men might be wrong or reconsider something, and men are if you watch traders, especially if you go and watch a trader speak or something, you'll hear the trader talk about all of his wins and how great he is and blah 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 and all this, and his real big ego, right? Typically, not all the time, but typically, and it's really this idea that they want to be the winner, they want to be right. And what I love about female traders, besides the fact that as a whole they typically, I believe, are much more likely to succeed than men, it's also that they're just okay, and part of it, I believe, is they're just okay with being wrong. And so that's kind of an interesting thing that you're bringing up there. I think that there is a lot to this idea that too many traders want to be right. So you were saying that a lot of the people were concentrating on basically bumping at your win rate, right? Is that what it was?
I don't know. Maybe I've just kind of got a bit of a thing for this expectation thing at the moment. I think it's kind of a big thing, and people are kind of missing out on it. And I think it's like almost one of those first things that you should plan. Obviously, you're not going to do that because when you first come to trading, you want to get a bit of background and you want to read and learn some strategies, and you need to take some information in first. But unless you really know what you're trying to achieve, I don't think you can really. It's like an important part of your strategy, really.
Yeah. What you're saying is you need to focus on the whole recipe, which is the expectation recipe, right? All the pieces of expectation that are why you're trading. You want to make money, right? That's what you want to do. And some people are focusing on little elements of that. It reminds me of my friend. She came to Australia from Japan, and she was talking about how, the difference in what people eat over here in Australia and how different that is to Japan. And she was making like cakes and cheesecakes and things. She was using like 1/5 of the sugar that the recipe called for. She was focusing on the sugar and why, there's too much sugar in these recipes and things like that. I don't know if you've ever been to Japan, Darren, but like they have these desserts where they eat things like sweet beans, it's like, whoa, this bean is really sweet, and it's something that's totally different to the Western world. We pump things full of sugar and fat because, that's really addictive and it tastes really good to us. So they have kind of a different range, right? Yeah. So anyway, so all of her focus was on the sugar in these recipes, and I was like, yeah, but you got to make sure that like it still ends up like a cake, or like a cheesecake. You know what I mean? Like she was focusing so much on the sugar and whether or not she could taste too much sugar in it. There was like in the end of it, you're like, well, is this really a cheesecake? Is this really like a piece of cake, or is it like a bagel now? You know what I mean?
Yeah. It is about the big picture, and I just don't think a lot of people even consider it. I think they think, well, I'm just going to be so bloody good at trading, then the end result can be whatever I want. The real world is just not like that. And I just think it makes the day-to-day process much easier as well. If you kind of have, it doesn't have to be like fixed targets, but let's say you work out what income you need a month to do what you want to do, and just kind of, okay, well, I could achieve that with just a 50% win rate. And then you can look back at your actual trading data and see how far you're off and see where you need to improve, rather than just kind of look at some figures and say, oh, well, 50% win rate's not high enough for me, I need 70. Not basing that on any real data.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. They're not.
I think we do that a lot, don't we? We don't, we make decisions basically, but without referring to the data first, and we just assume basically, and that is a massive mistake in trading.
Yeah. We tend to, and it happens in many different areas of trading, like we tend to focus on specific things. Like when I think of trading mistakes, I think of anchoring, how we use anchors and we say things like, well, I bought the euro at 1.15 even, so if it gets, and it's fallen down to 114, 113.98 now, if it gets back up to 115 even, I'm gonna dump my trade. So we've put that value on the euro at 115, even though the market's moved 100 pips now against us. We still have that value in our mind, so we kind of hold on to these losers, hoping they're going to turn around, and that's because we've anchored that thing. That's what's important to us, is that euro get back to where we entered at. And those sorts of mistakes are so easy and so common. That's just the way we operate. We use anchors. And so a lot of people, they anchor on the win rate, okay? So that win rate's 49%, Darren. That's just not good enough. Which is crazy because, like you said, like if you run the numbers on that and if you just said to somebody, like, okay, you're going to make 1 point for every dollar you risk, you make $1.85 or whatever it is, right? Whatever it works out to be. Like, people would probably say, yeah, I'll take that. Most people are going to say, yep, let's do that. Let's go with that. Let's roll with that. Yep.
Or you should be thinking or asking, how consistent is that? How many weeks have you done that on the trot? Is that likely to continue? And then you can get a real idea of the profit you could make. But yeah, people don't focus on that, do they?
Exactly. Yeah, and they miss out on compounding. We think about things, like people who invest money with somebody, they'll see a result and they'll go, wow, that's really good. We made 6% this month. And then they'll draw a straight line to the moon and go, okay, 6% compounded every year. Let's see, that's 72%. They start doing things like that too, where it's just, okay, this is the way it is. What about that month where we lose 4%? What about the month where there aren't as many trades in December or whatever? Those sorts of things don't come in to, we just focus on. And I think most traders probably focus on the good more than the bad, so they're much more likely to say, okay, I can trade this system. And then you say, well, wait a minute, what was the largest drawdown that you had? Oh, it was 40%. Oh, okay, so you're going to be able to trade, like if your $100,000 account gets down to 61,000, are you really going to be able to sit through that? Are you going to not change it up and change everything because you've lost $39,000? Like, are you really going to be able to do that? And they overestimate their ability to sit through those drawdowns.
Yes, certainly. I mean, especially when you rely on your back testing, you do your back testing, and you go through large periods of time in fast forward, essentially, and then when it comes to the crunch, and you're sat there Tuesday afternoon with a drawdown and nothing's happened for 5 hours, it's just like a completely different mental game then, isn't it? You're actually in the performance, and that's where people struggle, really. But again, that comes back to expectations. If you know strategy consistently has 2 bad days a week, if you're sat there on Tuesday with a day and a half losing, then it shouldn't be a problem for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So let's talk about this priming thing, because I didn't know about this before, and there was a documentary about it the other day on TV.
Okay.
Yeah, and for people that don't know what it's about, they did this experiment where they took people up in a lift to an interview with someone they didn't know. And the first group, they took them up and they gave them, there was a guy in the lift with them, and he just asked them to hold his coffee whilst he was sorting his paper out. And it was a warm coffee, and then they went and had this like really brief interview with this guy, maybe 2 minutes, and then they were questioned after whether they'd give this guy an important position in their company, and nearly everyone said yes. Okay, and then they repeated the same experiment, but this time they gave them an ice cold drink to hold in the lift. Same question, same scenario. And this time they were all a bit, well, I only met him for a bit. I'm not sure. I don't think he's the right sort of person. The idea is that warm things are comforting, so that made them have warm, comforting thoughts. And because of that, they warmed to this guy that they met in the interview. And yeah, it just completely blew me away. I thought, well, does that mean if you get up in the morning to trade and you've got a warm drink there, that you're more likely to sort of, feel good about your trades than if you had an ice cold one. And what if you're from a really hot climate and being warm isn't necessarily a good thing there? I mean, does it work the opposite way? I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, right. Well, it's interesting. I'd love to know more details, like what time of the year did they do was it in the winter that they did this in the lift? It was in the lift, right?
Yeah. I don't know that, but it didn't look like a warm climate, let's put it that way. The idea is that, it kind of, the feeling of being warm is comforting and, reminds you of like having a hug from your mum or something like that. So you just, in general, you've got more warm feelings going on inside you.
Right. Well, there's a competing theory. There would be an alternative explanation for those results. And there's a theory called terror management theory, which I think we should probably do an entire podcast about, but because it's so interesting. And I don't think we've spoken about it. But this theory, in a nutshell, is that we're all scared to die. And when we think about dying, it changes our perception of it. What we try and do is we try to hold on to our culture. Okay. Now, this guy got into the lift, presumably in the morning, and most people in the morning in a temperate to mild climate, in the morning, they typically, in the Western world, they have like a hot tea or a hot coffee, right? So that would be the stereotype. The stereotype would be that someone would have this hot drink. Now, if you don't fit the stereotype, then people tend not to like you as much. Now, this interacts with whether or not you've considered your own demise, and that's part of the whole terror management theory thing. And so there is an interaction there. But, and like I said, we probably could do a whole thing on this. But so if a terror management theorist was looking at these data, and again, I haven't seen the study, so I don't know all the details, but they might suggest is that what's going on here is simply that the person has fit the stereotype of like a worker, like a worker who comes in the morning. Worker comes in the morning with his papers and his briefcase or whatever and his hot drink. And if the worker comes in the morning without a hot drink instead of cold drink, is he like a weird guy who, drinks like spirulina smoothies in the morning or something and he doesn't have a coffee? Like, that's a little bit, you know what I mean? So, although, it could be that. So, yeah, so people tend to like people who fit the stereotypes. And, some of these really ingenious terror management theories, they've actually looked at people that fit stereotypes of different ethnic groups. And believe it or not, typically people will like someone more and show more favorable ratings in many different ways if they fit the stereotype than if they don't. And again, this kind of interacts with whether or not they've considered the fact that they are going to die one day, and that's where the terror management comes in. But just taking this piece of it, you could argue that. So that would be one possible competing explanation. But I understand where they're going with this, is saying, kind of warm and that sort of thing. Like, does it mean that you should be trading in a really warm office? Like, my office at home is really warm and inviting, whereas my office, off campus, like away from home, is really cold. It's got hardwood floors. It's kind of a cold corner of the building. It's kind of, should I only be trading at home because my home office has all this sunlight and really nice and warm with a nice view, or should I not be trading at my office? I wonder, if these things are something that could affect my results. I don't know, but I'd be interested to see them duplicate it and try and come up with a design that would pull away the bias towards stereotypes. If that in fact is a competing explanation, which I'm suggesting might be. Yeah.
Yeah, I do wonder about, because I'm quite strict with my trading day, even if I kind of perhaps change how I'm trading, I try to kind of have it all planned out so every day is pretty much like a groundhog day. So there's no sort of real surprises in my environment, and I set my alarm, it goes off, I get my coffee, I check my emails, and do you know what I mean? I do it very in a structured way. And I find
that superstition? That's not superstition, it's just structure.
I think it's just like, I've got to do something to control my mistakes. So, how can I control it completely? And that's just by, when I have a good day, I kind of remember how to repeat that. because it's so structured, I can remember the process, you know, whereas if I was like trading from a different room every day, I think I might struggle with that. I certainly struggle when I travel trying to get back into trading. I didn't realise it for a long time, but yeah, you know, the last time I went, it really sort of, yeah, you know, I'm in a different environment here. Things aren't as they normal are. I mean, I'm getting up at a different time of the day compared to the markets. I mean, I'm still getting up in the morning, obviously, but there it's, you know, it's during the Asian trading session. So yeah, I think so. I think, you know, for me, it certainly helps.
Yeah, I know traders who will actually physically leave their house and go to an office just because they want to feel like they've got this daily structure. And so when you get back from holiday, do you feel like you have to click into that routine to make sure that you're on track? Is that the idea?
Yeah, definitely. 100%. I need to... Well, I don't know whether I do or not, but I feel I need to do. And for me, it makes it easier to trade. And same with my strategy as well. I tend to be more structured in it now than I ever used to be. And maybe that's kind of a, you know, a
Right.
roll on from that.
So do you trade when you're away or not much when you're on holidays?
No, I'm pretty awful when I'm on holiday, actually. Yeah, it's something I need to get around because I like going on holiday and I want to do more of it. So I'm going away in November, and I'm going to have another go then. But I'm travelling with another trader this time, so that might be quite interesting. Maybe, you know, having another trader there and having someone else who you know, with an interest in trading might make it a bit easier to get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. That might be the ticket. Also, if you're taking, you know, an average of 25 trades a week and, you know, presumably on holiday you're trying to relax, maybe it's just not possible to trade at the same clip, you know, when you're on holiday if you're, you know, doing things, enjoying yourself, right? Like you just might not be able to physically squeeze them into the day.
Yeah. I am in a sort of cycle of quite intense trading at the moment. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's kind of good, actually, that I kind of get to the end of the day and I'm sort of, okay, you know, I'm tired from today. That was kind of hard work. I had to concentrate, and it kind of feels right, really, you know, because I feel like I'm going to work, and perhaps that's putting me in a more sort of focused frame of mind, and, you know, not just kind of, you know, loafing off and putting a trade on when I feel like it. I'm sort of actually going to work, if you like.
Sure. And do you have set hours? Do you say, I'm only going to trade for these 5 hours and then after that I quit, or set number of trades to take per day? Or how do you kind of limit yourself from just going hog wild?
Well, again, you know, structured entries. So my entries can only happen at the end of when a H1, a 60-minute bar closes. So I can only do one trade per hour maximum. And actually for it to be one every hour is pretty much impossible anyway with the way I'm trading. So generally, you know, I get 3 or 4 a day, and so that structures the number of trades. And I have like a specific time when I don't trade, okay? And I've even got an indicator now that marks it on the chart, so I can see when I'm supposed to start trading and when I stop. And the only reason I sort of go out of that is when I'm tired. If I get tired, even if I'm in a trade, or I just I stop for the day. And, you know, I know that's an acceptable reason to stop, whereas before I'd perhaps, you know, continue on, I just know that I'm going to make the wrong decision, or highly likely to make the wrong decision if I continue when I'm tired.
Yeah, right. That makes perfect sense. There's a famous dentist who consults for medical professionals around the world, and one of the interesting things about his dental practice, other than the fact that they don't have any signs, they don't advertise, one of the things that's interesting is, I didn't know this, but in dentistry they have high suicide rates, one of the highest professions, one of the highest suicide rates, and also there's a lot of churn, like the staff, the support staff, they leave a lot, they don't tend to stay. And what he does is, when everyone comes into the office, they have this big whiteboard and they have to write like a number. And so, you know, when someone comes in, if they're kind of a bit grumpy, a bit sad, or if they're a bit cheerful and happy. So you can, right when you walk in, you can see where everyone's number's at. So it's almost like it gives you a context to relate to them. You know, knowing that, oh, well, well, Jan's got a 6 today, so something's bothering her, so I don't want to be too, you know what I mean? So you can kind of know who you're dealing with. And I know traders who do the same thing. They kind of wake up in the morning, and before they start trading, they'll give themselves a number, like, how am I feeling today? Am I feeling really good or not so good? So it's not really rating the trade, it's rating yourself, so that you know kind of where you're at as you go into this and you start making your decisions. I just thought that can be a really smart way to approach it. I don't do that, but I can understand why some traders might do that, I suppose. Yeah.
Why are dentists sort of topping themselves then? I mean, they earn good money. It's not a particularly stressful job.
I think it's just, apparently it is stressful. I think just looking in someone's dirty mouth all day long, you know what I mean? Like, you're basically drilling mouths, and people are painful, and there's blood everywhere, and I have no idea why it is, but apparently the dentists have and they're not really considered doctors by the other doctors, That's one of my favorite things to do, actually, is whenever I go to a doctor, I make sure that they call me doctor because because I have a PhD in psychology, and of course they of course don't even, like, they just assume when they say my name, Dr. Peters, they just assume, like, oh, so are you in private practice, or what do you, and I say, oh, I'm a psychologist, and they're like, oh, I just love doing that because, of course, the medical profession feels like they own that name, doctor, and any dentist or psychologist or, anyone else who has a PhD or a doctorate degree that's not really, you're not a real doctor, So yeah, that's one of my favorite things. But yeah, I'm not sure exactly what it is. Apparently, it's just not fun to look into people's mouths and drill and have blood spurting and just, this dirty breath coming at you all day. Apparently, it's just not something that long term people can handle. I don't know. It's sounds crazy, but this guy. Yeah.
You think it'd be like coal miners or, some really horrible, hard manual labour. But they've all got Mercedes.
Yeah, you think if anyone's going to do it, it'd be a stonemason, right? Like, a stonemason is going to be the guy that offs himself, not the dentist. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. And they snap at each other. They tell the support staff to go get this, and the support staff resents them because they're so, all these. I mean, this guy really, he explains it quite well. But what he's done is he's completely shifted his whole business and made it almost to where it's like a club, and you have to be invited to come and see him, and everyone loves working there, and the staff's been there 20 years now, and all this stuff. He's completely turned it around, which is great. But I just didn't realize that it was so bad in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it kind of like ties in with, where I really wanted to take the priming thing is, this whole idea of kind of, being happy in your trading and getting set up and, and feeling comfortable when you go to trade. Like a lot of the big corporations have done now, they've kind of made the workplace more, friendly and, less strict, so people can be more creative.
Absolutely, yeah. They've got volleyball courts on campus and lots of bean bags or whatever. Yeah, so they're trying to make it comfortable. And so if I wanted to set myself up with some anchors and to prime myself for my trading session, what might I do? I might have a routine where I do the same sort of thing, get up the same time, check the same websites, maybe look at the overnight news, and then study my charts, get a cup of tea or coffee, sit down. Maybe I do some stretching after that, to get the blood flowing, and then sit down and decide, what's my daily plan, right? Or what would you say to that? Or how do you approach it? Do you go for a run and then come back and drink your coffee and sit down, or how do you structure your day when you're creating this routine?
I wish I did go for a run. I think really with me it's more about having it actually planned out, really. So I have actually taken the time to plan out, what I'm going to do. So I set, I have 3 alarms on my phone, one at 6:55, one at 7:55, one at 8:55. So that makes sure that I get the first 3 hours of the morning, even if I fall back to sleep. But I think really it's just that repeating pattern for me. So I get up and start trading at the same time, and I stop at the same time. And I've reduced the amount of instruments I trade as well. And I've been forever changing instruments, and I don't know why really. I've never really sort of got any hard data that says, well, you're better off trading gold than you are the euro. I think that's something we all do, isn't it? We jump instruments really when it's not necessary, and so yeah, I've reduced that. And I trade the currencies I know now. I spend most of my time in the UK, so why am I not trading the pound and the euro all the time? Because consciously or subconsciously, it's news about those that are always part of my life, and so it makes sense to trade those as well. So I think really it's just kind of years of experience of kind of whittling down what am I doing that really is not benefiting my trading, getting all of that out of it, and just kind of simplifying it.
Excellent, yeah. So really what you're trying to guard against is taking a trade outside of your rules, I suppose. Is that fair to say? Like your structure, you want to be awake during the sweet spot of the market, which is, I guess, 8 to 11 your time in the morning, and you trade the pairs you're comfortable with, and you make sure that they fit precisely into your strategy, into your...
I think the longer you go without making unforced errors, if you want to call them that, the more startlingly obvious it becomes when you are making one, and it just becomes easier and easier to remove them from your game. And the more sort of wild you are, and that's not really the strategy I'm trading now, but it's a good setup, I'll take that. And jumping over to different pairs and taking a trade there. When you trade like that, you really are out of control, and I don't think human beings are really sort of built to be able to work in that way with regards to trading. So I think, yeah, it's a case of trying to get as long a period as possible without making those human errors, so it just becomes habitual. And I think if you can remove almost completely from your trading, you're miles better off.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely the way. It's kind of like what happens over time is you switch. Like in the beginning as a trader, your gut is wrong, right? And as you gain experience, it's exactly what you just mentioned, which is so many trades not making an unforced error. When you start to make it, it's obvious, right? That's how I believe that you can kind of mark your progression. In the beginning, you should almost go against your gut. Like your gut is your enemy. And then later on, it's kind of like that's almost like your gauge, and it's your test, your litmus that's telling you, okay, no, I'm going off the rails here. I'm going into this is the wrong territory to be in. But you don't have that in the beginning. At least I didn't. I certainly didn't. Like that was the point. My trading partner and I in the beginning, we were actually sitting down seriously considering like every trade that we took to just do the opposite, because that was the only way that we were going to make any money, Of course, I don't think that would have worked either, but that's the kind of feeling that you get. And they told that to the Turtles. When Richard Dennis and William Eckhart taught the Turtles, they said, look, if you've got two trades, you don't know which one to take, go with the one that you think is the worst, the least likely to work out. Just take that one, which I found fascinating as well.
The interesting thing as well is it's the one part of your trading that you can have 100% win rate on guaranteed, which is removing error trades, If plan out your system, see if you can go a week with zero trades that are outside of your plan, and that's one way that you could have. If you want a high strike rate, then try and score it on removing those errors, those human errors.
Yeah, that's great advice. And for those of you listening, the only way you can do that is to have a very specific trading plan, right? That's the only way that that's possible. So if you're thinking to yourself, well, how am I going to do that? That just means that your trading plan is not precise and it doesn't list exactly what you're looking for in a trade setup.
Yeah, it's the one thing that I think a lot of people don't do, and I think a lot of experienced traders probably still haven't done it either. And you can certainly achieve a certain level of competence without it, But it definitely helps, It's been proven to help writing stuff down.
Absolutely. All right, Darren. Well, I think that's probably going to be good enough for today. How are you feeling about talking about death next time?
Yeah, bring it on.
Excellent. All right. We'll see you next time then. Take care.
Okay. Cheers, Walter.